popping, y'all? So today we're gonna talk about the Supreme Court as well as their upcoming ruling and decision on whether local anti-homelessness laws are based in cruel and unusual punishment. Now, if you didn't know, the Supreme Court has agreed on Friday to review some lower court rulings that makes it harder for cities in the western United States to prevent people from sleeping on the streets, aka anti-encampment or anti-homelessness laws. This appeal is coming from the city of Grand Pass in Southwest Oregon. Basically, this has been an issue in California with Governor Newsom, as well as many different, bipartisan, allies across that part of the United States that have been struggling to deal with homelessness, especially since, the pandemic. Now, depending on the situation and area, anti-camping laws can look different. It could be fining, homeless people, making them get off the street, arresting them, or placing different barricades and barriers on the street, such as spikes, as well as wires and stuff to make it kind of inhabitable for people to stay there or encamp there. In Oregon's case, Grand Pass could not enforce local ordinances that prohibit homeless people from using a blanket, pillow, or cardboard box for protection from the elements. And obviously the people that ruled in this case felt that punishing people for sleeping on the streets with no alternative shelter, keep in mind, amounts to cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Constitution, as well as elected officials urge justices to take up the case because they say the rulings complicate their efforts to clear tent encampments. The federal count of homeless people reached 580,000 people last year, driven by many different sources such as a lack of affordable housing, the pandemic, as well as lack of access to mental health and addiction, because that is also a certain cause of homelessness. But we're gonna get more on that later. But homelessness has been one of these hotly debated, one of these big issues for the past few decades, where a lot of people conflate homelessness with personal responsibility. Other people conflate homelessness to failed policies. A lot of people start having this blame game on different authorities, politicians, police, and just the homeless people themselves, when there's actually no real solution that has ever been talked about or haven't really been invested in, and that is getting adequate housing. Because as this article will state from the Bipartisan Policy Center, so I just want to let you know, because it ain't biased, homelessness is increasingly setting a policy issue across all levels of government, as well as a contentious political one, while urban communities and the representatives often frame the issue in terms of public safety, substance use, mental health. Some policy researchers emphasize the relationship between homelessness and housing markets. Individual attributes such as drug use, alcoholism, mental health, economics, inability, all that, basically does not drive overall rates of homelessness. And while some individuals who have those attributes are more likely to experience homelessness, they do not explain why some places experience a greater incidence of homelessness than others, meaning in different cities, meaning different communities, and with different attributes and stuff. And so looking at the real reason why homelessness is driving up, and why it's such a prominent problem, basically we need to look at Greg Colborn's and Clayton Page's Aldern's book, Homelessness is a Housing Issue or Problem, with cities with large homeless populations tend to share specific characteristics. And these characteristics are: they have experienced significant population growth, but have not added enough housing to meet the demand, as well as increasing demand for housing amidst a constrained supply of homes reduces vacancy rates, and increases rents, squeezing low income and vulnerable populations out of the housing market and into homelessness. And just going to the website about their book, basically when you're looking at homelessness, this is a per capita rate in 2019 before the pandemic. But basically when you look at percent with income below poverty versus homelessness count, basically as poverty rate goes higher, there's no big correlation between homelessness. Same can be said with cities, same can be said with counties. Generally tend with counties, especially the lower the poverty rate is, generally tend to be the higher of homeless population. Or you actually go right here, basically cities with a higher gross and rent generally trend upwards when in terms of homelessness, as well as same can be said about counties, even though it's still a little bit more concentrated right here. But pretty much what I just want to say with this is that homelessness is a housing issue. And not only do they do a lot of research and a lot of like, data in their book, they actually frame the reality of homelessness similar to like a game of musical chairs, where you're always going to have, less chairs than actual people playing a game, and people are having to be cunning, lucky, strategic, and athletic to make sure they have a place at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, someone is always going to lose out on a chair. And just going down this article by the American Journal of Public Health, which was released in the 90s, keep in mind the 90s, basically when they looked at Mayor Edward Koch's plan to round up homeless, judged to be mental ill against their will, and treat them for condition, the program actually failed because at the end of the day, there was this myth that the single homeless psychotic and mainly male individual who was a target of effort proved to be far less scarcer than the popular myths would suggest. Now, if that sounds familiar, that is kind of like the actual myth that we have today, that you got a lot of homeless people on the street, a lot of people shooting up using substances in camps, they're harming their children, have needles surrounding it all there. Like, yeah, there's many cases of that, but that is not the main picture of homelessness. Like, most people are homeless because of not having affordable housing or not having adequate housing at all, like the data just proved. But the people that are actually pushing this like narrative and misinformation are politicians, corporations, and marketing, because they're trying to push other political agendas and really just try to like make it seem like, oh, homelessness is this, that, and third. Here's my solution towards it. Do the solution. You might move people out the way. You might move people into a different section, whatever, when they're not visible. But basically, politicians will count that as a W, a win, and basically will use that to push their next campaign or their next agenda. But to keep going into the article, the social construction of homelessness is the creation of a situation in which, as a matter of policy, too many poor people are asked to chase too many few low-cost housing units. In 1981, the federal government spent approximately $30 billion per year on subsidizing low-cost housing, but by 1988, that figure had dropped below $7 billion. And this was done before inflation was adjusted, and so the impact is going to be a lot worse, obviously. But during the initial rounds of funding cuts, it was unambiguously the physically, psychologically, and socially most vulnerable among poor who hit the streets. But as funding cuts have continued and the scarcity of affordable housing has spread further up the social scale, such sharp non-economic distinctions between the housed and homeless, as Wood has said, demonstrate have begun to dissolve. Meaning, initially, people who were homeless were former mental patients, but by decades in, those without housing looked disconcertingly similar to those with roofs over their heads. So quintessentially, what this book and article have kind of like proven or really talked about today, especially when it comes to this video, homelessness isn't the fact that people are getting hooked on drugs or people are just necessarily just broke or poor and all that. Homelessness is a issue that is driven by lack of adequate housing as well as lack of affordable housing. And I think more and more people are starting to wake up to that issues, because people during the pandemic, when you had to deal with landlords, inflation, still continuing today, obviously, rent hikes and all that, basically a lot of people realized that they were one paycheck away or one death in the family away from actually being able to have housing and then to being evicted or being foreclosed on. People who are actually in these camps, or people who are actually on the streets and all that, most of them are people who missed those paychecks and they didn't have adequate housing or short-term housing or any type of places other than these tent cities and stuff. So the solutions right now into trying to find homeless people, trying to move them, trying to get rid of these tent cities and all that, this is just a ploy to really just trick the American public into thinking that homelessness is actually being solved, when they're actually they're being moved to other places when there's no real solutions being made. And I just want to implore y'all, don't fall for that trick, because even in that article, which was done in 1990, they even said that homelessness is not going to be solved with people trying to put people in mental health institutions or get them off the street, or just closing on these encampments. And so we need to really think about actual solutions here. And this is something that is going to be an ongoing issue that I'm going to keep up to date throughout the year. But with that being said, that has been Pop Health for today. If you like what you see today, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that one for good stuff. If you want to see some of my other content, I implore you to go watch this video or right here. Video right here, basically about the issue of Black mental health when it comes to Black women, as it relates to the case of a HBCU vice president who self-deleted herself last week. So definitely implore y'all to go watch that video. Well, in that, stay warm, especially if you're in Texas. It's very cold down here. Frosty if you somewhere other than the nation, but we're all cold right now. But peace out, y'all.